ordinary people's extraordinary stories.
Welcome to the Tim Heale podcast. In this episode, I'm going to have a chat with Jerry. Jerry, if you can tell me where and when you were born, and if you can describe what it was like, where you grew up, the schools you went to, and the education that you received.
Yeah.
Over to you, Jerry.
Yeah. Hi, Tim. Happy to be here. Yeah. So my parents came over from Taiwan and finished grad school in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And so that's where I was born. And so in Wisconsin, went to a pretty standard elementary school. And, my parents did a good job just letting me have a carefree childhood where I didn't have to worry about money. And, anytime I wanted a Christmas present, I got it. Right. So that was pretty sweet. Had a really great third grade teacher who was a former Vietnam vet. And so he had all sorts of stories and wasn't afraid to put us in boot camp if, we were acting out of line. So thankfully, I never was in boot camp, but I saw a lot of kids who were. And so, yeah, nothing really out of the ordinary in Wisconsin, but there wasn't a large Asian community there. So, had my share of racial epithets thrown at me. One girl got in a tiff on a playground telling me to go back to Japan where I belong. It's like, well, I don't understand that, but okay. And so my journey took an unexpected detour after I finished fifth grade because my dad, his job, he kind of bounced around a couple different companies. He had a master's in chemical engineering. And so at one point, the branch that he was working on in Wisconsin shut down. And so next thing we know, we're moving to Knoxville, Tennessee, where I started middle school, where I started sixth grade. And so,
all right.
Go ahead.
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
Your parents came from Taiwan.
Yes.
Were you born in Taiwan?
No, I was born in the U.S. I was born in Wisconsin. Yeah.
Okay. And how concerned at the moment are you for Taiwan with what's going on?
This is not a new story, unfortunately, right? I remember, in the mid 90s when, China was doing more of the same thing and just firing missiles into neutral space and just causing all sorts of issues. And honestly, it's always going to be a concern. On the other hand, I would just want to roll my eyes because this is not a new threat, right? Like like China. It's as if China thinks that somehow, while the world is looking away, at other, world diversions like the Ukraine invasion and such, that somehow people are just going to not notice the fact that they, want to invade and take over Taiwan. So, it's just a shame that despite their best efforts to come across as a country that says, oh, look, we're modern and we have integrity now, it's clearly there's a power dynamic there that has been ongoing for quite some time. And, as long as people simply want to overlook the human rights injustices that China has done for the sake of business, things won't get better.
Yeah. So have you visited the country at all?
It's been a while since I visited. I last went to Taiwan, like 2007, so about 15 years ago. So basically, and that's part of the journey, is just that when I was still living in Knoxville, I had more opportunities to travel internationally. When I moved to Texas 12 years ago, I didn't travel internationally for about 6 years before I finally had the chance to go to Beirut. And even then, it's been tough trying to find time to visit family, given the recent circumstances as well. So believe me, it's a relationship I wish I could cultivate more, but lately it's just been more difficult. Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, that aside, should we go back to sixth grade?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Let's go back in the time machine. So Tennessee was definitely a different culture shift for sure, right? A lot more Southern hospitality, a lot more face to face. You can say play acting, right? Because the hospitality is there, even if you don't necessarily like somebody, right? And that wasn't bad. I went through my usual adolescent challenges of, crushing on girls and getting picked on by bullies. And, I was a scrawny Asian kid that was just trying to fit in. So, did the best I could to honor my parents' efforts to invest in my education. And, so, around junior, senior year, I finally kind of found my circle of friends that I was comfortable with, and I was excited for college. But college is also another culture shift, because I ended up going to school in Houston, where I currently live. And so Houston was a whole nother world, right? People in Texas are very proud of Texas. And,
Yes.
and so I learned quickly that I was, academically, I was a relatively big fish in a small pond. But then, going to a school like Rice, where, you have you're dealing with the top 10 of everybody's class, and you see quickly who is self-motivated and who relied more on their parents, to stay on top of things, like myself. Right. And so, when my mom is not the one, driving me to be sure I'm cutting out distractions and staying on top of my schoolwork, right, my grades suffered a little bit. And so I originally had dreams of being pre-med, ran in my family. My paternal grandfather is a physician for many years. And when I got a C in organic chemistry my sophomore year, I just pretty much gave up on those. I just said, well, I guess I wasn't that serious about it, right? Otherwise, I would have worked harder at this. And so had to do a pivot, right? And had to ask myself, well, if I've basically given up on the idea of med school, which I technically didn't have to, but I just wasn't willing to put more work into it. So, well, what else do I want to consider? And I said, well, I still want to do healthcare, but maybe pharmacy would still be a valid profession. So I got my pharmacy prerequisites lined up. I convinced pharmacy school that I would make a good pharmacist, and actually got accepted. Actually left after my junior year to start pharmacy school. And that was a hard decision, because my parents are the ones kind enough to help me with my tuition costs, and they said, hey, look, go ahead and please save us a year's worth of tuition. And just start the next chapter of your life. And, of course, me wanted to be around my friends and didn't want to leave my friends. Right. It was that was hard. And, in hindsight, it was a decision I could appreciate. I just didn't appreciate it at the time. So went to pharmacy school, and I was back up in Memphis, Tennessee, on the west side of the state, because that was the only pharmacy school in the state. And, went through some years where, grad school was tough, and, had some decent community there, but I had to learn a lot of lessons that I wouldn't have learned otherwise, because, undergrad was very cush, right? We had a cafeteria, a meal plan. Now I have to fend for myself and meals, and, still find time to study and cook. And it's just not good for, Asian single grad student life. It's just not a pretty picture. Right. Yeah. And so thankfully got through pharmacy school relatively, without too many bumps and bruises. But my final year in school, finally got to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Actually did a rotation in Ireland, in Dublin for a month, which, kind of opened up my eyes, because before I was just very closed-minded about the world. I was very much settling for comfort. And I'm like, why would you, leave your friends to do study abroad? That just doesn't appeal to me at all. But, once I went to Ireland for a month, I just said, wow, this world has opened up to me. Now I want to travel all the time. Right. But I had to deal with the fact that I was about to become a grown-up, or at least I thought I was, because that year, right, the months leading up to my graduation, my mom and I had very different ideas about how my career should go. And we actually both wanted me to work for a chain pharmacy, but I didn't agree with her choice of chain pharmacy. And even though my mom's never worked a day in her life in pharmacy, moms know best, right? And so she's like, no, you need to work for this company. And so, leading up to this was just this aversion to conflict, right? Because I don't want to upset my parents. I don't want to upset other people. I'm just trying to be liked, right? And so, I was at a stage in my life at that point where I wasn't willing to put up with, her, what I'll say is nagging, right? Her insistence on what she thought I needed for my life, where she's like, hey, I have this girl lined up for you. You should marry her. She's really great. This job, I don't want you to deal with the same struggles that your dad had trying to maintain viable employment. I'd rather you just work for this company for like 20 years and just bank away money aggressively. And then one day you'll finally get to do what you want. And, I'm just like, I don't know if I like that plan, but I'll go with it, because I just don't want to
Yeah.
with her insistence. And so, yeah, so for the first couple of years, moved back to Knoxville, lived there, just hating my job, hating my mom's plan for my life, hating her insistence that I implement the plan for my life. And then, there was a stage where I was working for this chain pharmacy that I actually got comfortable because I was at a store that had flexible hours. I was able to take longer trips without using vacation time. And I knew just how rare these situations were. And so I actually got scared to leave. And, my boss was happy with me. She knew that as long as I was better than 70 or 80% of the rest of the staff pharmacists, that I knew I wasn't going to really get in trouble for anything. So it was a pretty cush time, and I almost got complacent. But when I transferred to another store closer to where I was living, and that flexibility went away, I realized just how unhappy I was with the job again. Realizing, hey, you know what, this isn't a long-term choice or a good long-term path. And so, after a really bad customer service incident back in 2010, I said, okay, I've had enough. Like I can't live at home anymore. This is just, I had just earned the third week of vacation. Right. And I was like, it doesn't matter because the other 49 are terrible. So, I'm still going to look for other things. And so, this is where, things got interesting because I told a friend, that I was interested in trying to find a teaching job for pharmacy students, but I didn't have a conventional, PhD, so I couldn't get a university job. But she worked for a consulting company, a pharmacy consulting company here in Houston, and said, hey, my previous position opened up because I got promoted. Do you want to apply for it? I said, absolutely. And so next thing I know, I'm walking away from a full-time job with benefits, which my parents were just shocked by, to work for this consulting company that they had never heard of. Right. So I'm moving from Knoxville to Houston. I'm excited for this next chapter of my life. I thought this would be the last company I ever would have to work for because I knew and respected them so much. And 11 months later, I got fired. And that was it was a tough wake-up call, right? Because I didn't want to admit that what I was doing and thinking at the time was going to get me in this kind of trouble. Basically, the tipping point for that job was when I was tasked to draft test questions for the next round of students. I got writer's block and got scared, and I just basically convinced myself that as long as I told them of good enough stories to why I didn't get the job done, that they would understand. And obviously that doesn't work in entrepreneurship, right? Either you get results or you have excuses, but you can't have both. And so at the time, right, I just couldn't appreciate that perspective. In either case, they said, we've given you more than enough chances to prove yourself, and, you haven't come through. So that's where the roller coaster just continued to take another turn. After 6 weeks of looking for another job, I end up at a House of Cards pharmacy where 4 of my paychecks bounced, filling for crooked doctors. And now, right, just double whammy, more reality check, right? Not only am I jeopardizing my license, I'm not even getting paid for this, right? And then even worse, I'm sending checks home. I'm not checking the bank account, but my mom is. And, when the first checks bounced, okay, fine. Weird things happen. Okay, just get me the cash, well done. But then 2, 3, and 4 bounced. And I asked my mom, did you know that 2, 3, and 4 bounced? And she goes, oh, yeah, but I was too afraid to tell you. And it's no, you don't hide bad news, right? Now I'm trying to pay for groceries with money I don't actually have. You need to tell me this so I can do something about it, right? And so, again, my conflict aversion kept me from really confronting this guy, because what do you do to confront the guy who's clearly ripping you off? And you're just afraid that if you hit him too hard, he's just going to cut you loose, and now you don't have any money, right? So it's what kind of game do you play? So after 9 months of that, my friends got me out of that job with a more legitimate company that liked me, but couldn't pay me more than 8 hours a week. So I said, well, what do I do? And they said, well, you can get more hours for us out in Austin if you're willing to work out there, which is 2.5 hours away from Houston and only an hour away from San Antonio. Right, I could end up in worse places. I have friends that ask me why everyone else is trying to fight for a job in Austin, and you're the only one that we know that's trying to leave. And I said, well, it's just not home. Houston at this point had become home to me. And so that summer, this is 2012 now. I have no idea what my life is going to look like. And that summer was key because some friends of mine who run a pharmacy leadership nonprofit said, hey, our national meeting is coming up. We know you've been facilitating on the fraternity side, but one of our facilitators backed out, and we need your help on the leadership side. Would you be willing to step in? And I said, absolutely, because I love these guys. I was excited for the chance to work with them. And something happened when I was helping teach this leadership material. because for the longest time I said leadership is hard. I don't like failing at it. I don't like having these difficult conversations. I'm not good at them. I don't think I'll ever be good at them. Right. But now, right now, when I'm teaching this, I said, well, wow, what if I could be a good leader? Right. How would I carry myself? What kind of work would that involve? And so now I come back, from that summer session, like all fired up. And then the company I was working for at the time said, hey, you can either stay part-time in Austin, or there's a full-time manager position that opened up in Houston if you want to take that. And I said, I need the benefits. I need the benefits. I'm tired of feeling scared. I don't want to, play it safe. I'm ready to come home. So yeah, let me go back to Houston, take on this manager position. And, me being so short-sighted that somehow I could be able to finally take my gloves off and say, this is the last job I'll ever need. And then I proceed to get written up the following year because my technicians are not pulling their weight, and I'm not writing them up. And so management puts me on a probation and says, hey, their behavior is a problem, but your passivity is the bigger problem. So, we got to, hold you to a higher standard. And so, after about a month or so, the company had their funding pulled, actually. So, I was already planning to leave, and it just kind of, made this situation a little more urgent. Yeah, it's like, well, I just need to look a little faster. And so the crazy thing is I randomly get a job opportunity, email. And so I apply for it. And the only reason I get an interview was that I had leadership experience on my resume now. And so I said, wow, leadership saved my career, right? Because I wouldn't have this option unless I had improved my resume and showed, hey, yeah, I have a track record of taking on these challenges. And so unfortunately, that job only lasted 11 months because of a bad business model. And so what I tell people is that, in pharmacy, yeah, I was thankful to have more job options, but if they're like icebergs that melt after 1 or 2 years, it doesn't matter how many icebergs I get to hop to. If they're still going to, hop, I'm still going to melt. I got to hop to another one. And so about 5 years ago now, when my previous employer went under, I said, I'm tired of chasing insurance, drama. I'm tired of dealing with doctor scripts, and, but I love teaching these leadership workshops, which I've done since, 2012. What would a career in coaching and facilitating look like? How could I make that a reality? And still very scared of rejection and failure. So it's more like a hobby, for the next couple of years.
Yeah.
And then what I tell people is it took a pandemic for me to say, hey, you know what? How much longer am I going to put this off? So let me just go ahead and file the LLC, get the website up. And, don't get me wrong. Like, had I not had my pharmacy job during the pandemic, I don't know what I would have done. Thankfully, I'm very grateful for that paycheck in the middle of a very difficult time. And at the same time, right, at one point, am I going to have a clear exit strategy to launch into coaching and facilitating full time? And so that kind of brings us to now, where I've just been, trying to increase visibility and get to know people through networking opportunities like podcasts. And so that's what brings us here today, and just saying, hey, you know what? I'm just trying to meet fun people and tell them my story and hear their story, and see how we can help each other. So that's the journey.
Wow. Let's just go back a little bit. Let's have a look at you're going through pharmacy school, okay?
Yeah.
Now, I see you've got to learn, I guess, some Latin, because lots of books come out with Latin names.
Yeah.
But how do they go about teaching you to read doctors' handwriting?
Prayer.
That's probably got to be the hardest part of the whole course, surely.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of them, because you don't know. Like they show us medication error examples all the time of what doctors write, and it's terrible. Like, and then the pharmacist usually is the one that gets sued because they guessed wrong on a drug, and we're the ones liable because we were the last ones to dispense the medication to the patient. And so that's much harder than the advanced pill counting by fives that a lot of people like to tease me for.
So the pharmacy school then. So how long was that?
Pharmacy school was a 4-year program. So we basically had 3 years of class and then 1 year of rotations. And then took some board exams, and then we're out in the workforce. So it was 3 years. It was the first year is mainly like basic, science review, like biochemistry and medicinal chemistry and such. And then the bulk of the curriculum in the next couple of years is pharmacology and then therapeutics, where they specifically go over, a body system and a disease state and the drugs used to treat it. So therapeutics is kind of where everything comes together, where you understand, okay, here's how the body functions, here's where it breaks down, here are the mechanisms of action that the drugs use to treat the problem when the body breaks down. And this is what you then tell the patient, to be sure that the drugs work the way that they need to alleviate the symptoms.
Yeah, so I guess you have to go really in depth to know what's in the drug to start with. Mm-hmm. If they're on another drug for something else, mm-hmm. Is that going to have an effect on the drug that you're giving them?
Oh, absolutely.
And do the doctors help with that situation? Do the doctors identify those issues before you, or do you, as a pharmacist, have to sort of look at what other medication these guys are on to make sure that it's not going to conflict and cause them more damage than they've already got?
Yeah, that's a fair question. So there's a number of factors to answer your question, right? Ideally, and the ideal situation is that the patient only has like one main doctor, right, that they go to, and the doctor has, a complete medication list for this patient, and can do a quick review of those drugs, to make sure. And so, the doctor has a lot to cover, right? Because there's a lot of drugs, and some patients have a long list, and to remember every possible interaction of everything that could go wrong. Right. Ideally, he would have all the resources he needs in order to make sure he doesn't write for something that's going to interact with another drug, or write it for a drug that the patient has an allergy to, or if there's a disease condition that that would make using this drug dangerous, right? And so it's as much as doctors need that, they also need an extra layer of help, right? So that's where the pharmacist comes in to say, hey, even if the doctor is technically able to be self-sufficient with this, right, it's always helpful to have like another person to have a second set of eyes, just to say, hey, look, maybe we missed the fact that this patient is pregnant, or maybe this patient saw a different doctor that filled at our pharmacy that this first doctor wasn't aware of. And so having an extra layer of protection can only help the prescribers. So it's ultimately, from a liability standpoint, the pharmacist will, if the pharmacist doesn't catch it right, everyone gets mad at the goalie for letting the goal, letting the other team score. But it's just the system that led up to that, right? That can also be an issue. And so hopefully people can understand, okay, here are the main points of contention or interest or consideration, so that we understand, okay, maybe the doctor is able to confer with the pharmacist as they're writing the drug, right? So then it doesn't get down to the doctor writes the drug, the patient comes to the pharmacy catches the possible drug interaction, then the pharmacy has to call the doctor who's already busy seeing another patient. Ideally we could kind of engineer out that flaw, but we understand everyone's busy, and so we just need to figure out a better way to move that forward.
Yeah, I guess certainly over here in England, when you go to the pharmacy to pick up a prescription, they've checked it from coming from the doctors, and then you get at least two pharmacists check each other to make sure that it's the right drug, the right quantity, and I guess if a doctor's scribbled out the prescription and they can't understand it, they'll have to go back before they'll issue it. I know certainly I'm on a few different drugs, bloke of my age.
That happens.
You need a few bits and pieces to keep you going.
One quick situation I'll give an example. I mean, it's difficult, right? I remember like during rush hour one Monday evening, a parent came in for a kid who was sick, needed an antibiotic, but neither me nor the other pharmacist could read the doctor's handwriting. And, we're trying to call this children's hospital, emergency room. No one's picking up, right? Because everyone's slammed at 5:00. And
Yeah.
and we tell the lady, we're like, we can't dispense this because we don't know what the doctor wrote. And she's like, what do you mean? My kid is sick, like he needs the medication. And we're just like, if we dispense the wrong medication, right, then now we're going to get sued
Yeah.
because you insisted that the patient needs an antibiotic, and we're not denying the urgency of the situation. But if we can't dispense what is correct, until then, you're just going to have to wait, because that's not a risk that we can afford to take on our side.
Yeah. Because sure as eggs exists, being in America, they're going to sue your ass off, aren't they?
Yep. Those lawyers are looking for opportunities for sure.
Yeah. So, coming forwards then, so you've bounced around. I thought sort of pharmacies were like a bit like funeral directors. They're kind of never ever going to go out of business.
Fair
But
enough.
clearly, you picked up a couple of wrong uns there, somewhere along the line, where they've either gone bust or you got sacked because you can't give somebody a bit of a telling off.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's to give people a more complete picture of the landscape, and I'm happy to give people a behind the curtain view of this profession, right? Because when I first got into pharmacy school, all of a sudden, like, these drugstores started to take off, and you had like this artificial demand, because at the time in Tennessee, Memphis was the only school in the state, and then you have all these other companies like building drugstores, and all of a sudden you have this inflated sense of demand. Salaries were going up. I had no shortage of job offers when I was going through school and even graduating. And you had people, I remember my first year in school, Walgreens sponsored a dinner for my class, and they said, we will hire every single one of you if you're willing to work for us. And it was a class of 100 people. You're like, man, this is great, right? Your ego goes up a little bit, and you're like, this is great. Like, some people offer me signing bonuses, some people offering like a car, a relocation bonus, all these other things, right? And then a strange trend started to happen, right as I was about to graduate, where all these schools said, hey, wow, pharmacy school is a profitable revenue source for us, right? Because a lot of pharmacy school programs are actually 6-year programs. So they basically build in 2 years of undergraduate work into their pharmacy curriculum. And so instead of just 4 years of tuition revenue, you can get 6, right? So all of a sudden, all these schools are applying to set up pharmacy schools. And now the job market is much more saturated, right? Now, right, the drugstores are getting filled up, and now, like, and these schools make no apologies for that, right? And they say, well, we got accredited, we can give you the degree. It's not our fault that if the market goes bust after we've enrolled you in our program. And it's like, well, you kind of are responsible, because you're basically graduating competition for me and for all the classmates that are graduating, right? And so, like, for a while, the last couple of years, a lot of kids were either scared to enroll in pharmacy school, or number two, graduate, because they had no way of any idea how they were going to pay off all their student loans, because they didn't have a skill set that was in high demand anymore. And the pandemic, ironically, has kind of shifted back the pendulum toward the middle, because there are these jobs that nobody wants. But now I'm seeing all these ads, right, for jobs that nobody else wants. And it's like, well, I'm grateful that I can find a job, but if the selection is still only mediocre, right? Like, how happy can I really be that, at least if my current job goes under, at least I can find another one. So there's a lot of, interplay, a lot of selfish interests that dictate supply and demand. And what I tell people though is that I like being a pharmacist. I love the knowledge base that I have acquired through school. I'm glad that I'm not, going to be fooled by direct to consumer advertising. Like, when they use technical terms, I can discern them. But having to work as a pharmacist, that's another question, right? Because there are, don't get me wrong, there are jobs that people enjoy solving clinical challenges, and they get reimbursed properly for that, right? A large
Yeah.
shortcoming of pharmacy school is that they don't tell you about the business side of healthcare, right? They say, well, you need to get an MBA or another degree in order to get that business sense. But what if you built that into the curriculum, right? And people are just like, oh, you should give back to your alumni. As an alumnus, you should give back. And it's like, well, do you want some of my debt? Because you didn't tell me how to build a viable business. Like, how am I supposed to give you money to, that I don't have? You say, be grateful for your degree. I'm just like, well, be grateful for my debt. Like, I don't understand. Help me make money so I can give you money, right? There's a prerequisite there.
Yeah. Chicken and egg sort of syndrome there, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So you've got through the pandemic. So you're working as a pharmacist all the way through. Yep. So you've had a check, but at the same time you're working on building your own business, is it?
Yes. Yep. That's the side hustle that's supposed to become the main hustle. Yes.
Yeah. So are you still working as a pharmacist and doing your own business? So you've got that bit of a cushion if things sort of start going a bit with your business. So what is your business?
So it is a coaching and consulting business, mainly for leadership and conflict resolution. I did get a certification as a leadership coach. I spent a lot of money on that program, actually, which is another business thing, right? Education is a business. But so I got certified, and then, from all the coaches that I met, they told me how to start my own business. And so, I'm just in the process of trying, struggling, failing to land clients and, add value to the world through my offerings. And honestly, the first year I started in October 2020 officially. And so the first year was just survival. I was just happy that I did enough private tutoring on the side just to cover my expenses. And, now I'm just getting hit with all these marketing pitches of saying, hey, why settle for singles when you can start hitting home runs, right? This is the program, join our program and we'll help you become the six-figure coach that you've always envisioned for yourself. And just to filter through all that noise has been hard. I'm not going to deny that, because I'm just trying to figure out who's willing to help me, but not just like drain my bank account. Right?
Yeah, so that's now coming to fruition, is it? It's all coming together.
It's starting to, So this year, I'm trying to just continue to plant more seeds. Still applying on podcasts like this one. Meeting fun people, and just in fact, one of the bigger wins was that one of the coaches I know who has their own coaching practice said, hey, I have a gig with MD Anderson, the giant cancer hospital, and when I mentioned your name, they said they would be interested. So would you be okay to be on my bench in case the gig plays out in full? And that was a big step, I think, just because when this other coach says, hey, you know what, I see the way you're scrapping, I like the resilience you've had just trying to stay open and scrap your first year and not be too much in the red. You know what, maybe this guy's a good one to keep on my team. So between that and just figuring out who else I can collaborate with in terms of putting on some programming and workshops that would really help corporations or individuals. That's the next stage in trying to, bootstrap my way forward.
Yeah, I mean, that's always a challenge. I mean, moving forward with a business to get it to grow, to get the resilience built in, I guess, and to get your target audience, who you're going to deliver it to get them on side, to get the recommendations, to get the word of mouth to keep it going, I suppose.
Absolutely.
And if you've got a good product, people like it, they'll come back again. So, excellent. So that's where you are nowadays. That's where you've got to. You've got your business set up. How can people get in touch with you if they want to use your services? Are your services online, or do you do it remotely, or do you need to do it face to face? Do you need to take somebody around the back and sort of explain it in graphic detail? Or
happy to answer that question for you.
How does it work?
Easiest way to get in touch, you can connect with me on LinkedIn if you want, but all the good stuff happens at my website, which is www.adaptingleaders.com. From there, you can download a free guide on how to handle difficult conversations. You can schedule a complimentary 30-minute call. You can read the free blog where I summarize useful, interesting leadership literature and offer other life hacks. And there are formal coaching programs available. Some are self-study, which can be as little as $50. If you want the big enchilada, and you want me to open up my entire kitchen sink, that's about $4 or $5K, and that's fine. Like I said, there are a couple price points, and people can decide, hey, I'm just a student. I need money for coffee and groceries. Sure, read the free blog. Start there, right? We don't want to exclude anyone just because of price to get help. But if you really want the full extent of resources and experience that I bring to the table, ideally you'd see that as a good value. Because, right, I'm not here to rip anybody off, right? I'm not here to break up to anybody, but I do want them to realize, hey, if you're going to pay me $5,000 for a 6-month, program, I'm going to come through in every possible way for you, right? Because you have shown me that you put some serious skin in the game.
Yeah.
So that's the best way. Just www.adaptingleaders.com.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, Jerry, I think I've learned a thing or two today, that's for sure.
Wonderful.
So hopefully everybody else will.
Yeah.
And
The Tim Heale Podcasts. Ordinary people's extraordinary stories.